Wow, what a journey. So my name is Lyza Saint Ambrosena, and like many who are on what you'd call a spiritual path, if you had told me when I was young everything I would have to go through and endure to attain a level of spiritual integrity or spiritual ability, I don't know that I would have said yes, in all honesty, in all truth, because it's taken more courage and more grace and more suffering than I would have ever dared to imagine that I could survive through. And yet I'm here. And I feel deeply honoured and deeply blessed to be living the life that I live now with a beautiful husband, incredibly astute, lovely children, and living my life doing my life's passion, which is as an energy healer and a woman who gets to support other women going through emotional and transformational spiritual crises through my energy healing and spiritual mentoring work. I teach spiritual energy and work not because I've read a book and it's the in thing, but because I've put many years and hours of full-on life experiences, being both experiences where I've actively done physical exercises, been a vegetarian for 20 years, done a lot of huge, incredible amounts of deep, soulful meditation, tears, crying, all those sorts of things. I've put that sort of physical effort in, but I've also been through my own crises and learned through those. So when I pull those together, that's how I'm able to do what I do. So I'm really excited to be sharing my story from when I was a kid now, because I can actually, having come out the other side to some degree, where I can breathe and look back on my life with incredible compassion, I can actually look back and see the turning points and the decisions I made, which have brought me to where I am in my own heart now, and I'd love to share that with you. So, are you ready? So, I was born in 1968, and I was born on a farm, and so we were raised with dairy farm on our own milk, coming out of the cows, on really great food. And then we got to live beside the ocean. We moved to the beach in Mount Maunganui in New Zealand at the age of 4.5, where I got raised where I could walk at any time barefoot to the ocean or to a lapping harbour, where the water was softer, where we could see the fish swimming, where we had fresh salt mineral water coming up, hot salt mineral water coming up right in the harbour where we were. So I was actually around a lot of nature element that helped my soul and my mind and my spiritual to just expand and release at that young age. And I think unconsciously I realized that if I was stressed, I could relieve that stress using the spiritual energy. And here's me at that age. That's me. So how cute is that? So that's when there was still innocence within me. And I also learned incredible compassion. I was raised, a lot of my best friends were Māoris, and they have the Polynesian body can hold such massive spiritual mana, spiritual energy, that I was around a lot of that. And I learned a beautiful humility being around there, and often would look down at my own skin and go, I'm not black this lifetime, like I'm not dark. I felt like I'd look down at my own skin and realize, even though I hadn't heard about reincarnation, I'd think, this isn't the only body I've ever had. And I remember sitting up on this Mount Maunganui, and I'd be sitting often up on a pile where they'd carved a track through, and you would see these deep, 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 probably 20-foot high peppy shells that were kind of like a mussel. They're about that round and they're white. These shells that had been pits where when they'd lived up on the mountain top as a pa, which was like a Maori village, they'd throw all of their peppies into these certain pits, which is where they'd just leave them to build and grow. And some people say that was so that when invaders were coming and they'd walk on the pippies, they would hear them coming. Others say it was just a place to store the pippies. But I remember sitting on top of those and feeling like my aura would expand and become bigger, and that I'd actually sat on that mountain before. Though it also could have been that there was these presences coming and sitting in me, like almost a form of channeling of great warriors. It was very masculine energy would come and sit within me and look through my eyes and look at and go, just the peace and the presence and the astuteness, this incredible mana and power and astuteness and integrity that would look through me as a young kid. So that was very powerful, and I was so blessed. My parents owned a holiday park, a caravan park, so I'd live in my bikinis for 6 to 8 weeks of every year around the holiday season. But in the winter season, my parents decided when we were 11, we got to spend 7.5 years in the US, traveling around, 7.5 months in the US, traveling around with a car and caravan. And I got to travel with my brothers and my parents in it, and we'd see some incredible, incredible sights at that time, which really expanded my horizon. And of course, in those days, we didn't have computers, personal computers, or computer games, or we didn't watch a lot of television. So especially while we were traveling, you can imagine 7.5 months in the US in 1979 and 5.5 months in Europe in 1982 without television. We actually got to talk to each other. We actually got to be awakened. I felt like I was completely awakened looking at some of the incredible art from hundreds and hundreds of years ago in Europe, especially in Rome. My God, I just felt like I could look at these huge paintings and feel. I remember one specifically, and the women had these huge big hats that went like this with the white cloth that would fell back, and it was a tapestry that was probably 30 foot long along the wall of these incredible scenes of the courtesans at that time. I remember looking up at them, and it was like something went woof, 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 woof. And even at 13, I went, my God, I've been here before. Like, I was so big, my energy was so big at that time, and I felt like I was having these awakening experiences all through Europe as I was revisiting energies and land and earth masses and experiences and buildings that I'd been to before. So that was very powerful. So from that point on, when I went back to school, I'd actually been doing tap dancing all my life, and so learnt to perform. I learnt to perform sort of at the age of 5 to 7 and upwards, singing and dancing, before I actually realised you're supposed to be afraid of being in front of lots of people. And my teachers and the students would often choose me to go up the front and present to the school. And I'd be chosen naturally as a leader because I wasn't afraid of communicating in front of large groups of people. And then I'd also fallen in love with the Catholic Church, because from before I could remember, I loved Mass. Oh my God, we had the best priest. He was like 6 foot everything, and Irish, and he would speak like this with a broad Irish accent. And when he said his sermons, oh my God, you could feel the church being filled with such great spirit. And it was this incredible energy. And even though I didn't really understand a lot of what was being spoken about, I got it, man. The church would fill up with this incredible presence. And I felt loved, and I felt seen by the divine, and I felt this incredible desire in me to do good. And it taught me virtues and integrity, and I loved confession. I could come along, and even if I couldn't remember what I'd done that was naughty, I could come along, I would feel this incredible sense of release and a return to innocence once I felt forgiven. And later on, of course, I realized that it's about self-forgiveness as much as it is about seeking forgiveness from anything outside of us. But that's such a huge part of the healing process for me now, even in the journey with people who come into my healing room. Often they just want to let something on their chest that may have happened to them. And some people will say, it's the first time I could see the first or the second person I've ever been able to tell this to. And the relief and the lightness in their body and their chest and their whole energy field when they let it go is phenomenal. So I remember kneeling down at a wooden pew, and I was so little that when I kneeled down, that you'd roll these little things down and you could kneel your knees on them, and I could just fit my little hands up above over the top of the back of the church pew, the wooden pew, from the people who were sitting in front of me, and I'd have my hands there. And I'd be praying, I was so earnestly praying, and I could see up on the wall that have these different images, and one of the images was of these beautiful hands in prayer with glowing light, and they would talk about all of the amazing healings that Jesus had done. And whether Jesus was true, whether some of the passages in the Bible are true, whether any of that was real, something about it really touched my heart. And if you come into my healing room, you'll see one of the most beautiful images I have is I've got several, but one of them is of the Christ consciousness with this beautiful golden light all around him, and the Sacred Heart, which I believe is the thymus energy here, which radiates light. And there's also incredible images with just the energy pouring out from the heart and the body. And so I would pray and I'd just say, please let me be good like Jesus. Please, I really wanted to have healing hands like Jesus because I wanted to love people and help people and be good and do good. And so it's beautiful that now that when I do work and my hands start to go, I can really feel that switch on. And there are times when I'm working with people and it's like working with wood because they don't have much faith or much a belief in anything outside themselves that to pull them into the light more. And so at those times is when I call them the Christ consciousness energy, and it feels like I supercharge into this golden ball of light, and what starts to happen is this energy starts to come right out through the palms of my hands, and it flows right through people's bodies and starts to soften and open and heal some of the emotional and traumatic wounding that is within their body. So when I was 11 and in Oregon, I remember one time an older lady looked at me and she said, "Now, darling, what do you want to do when you're older, when you grow up?" And I remember at that time it came to me in a flash, and I turned, so the lady was there, and I turned to my mother and I said, "Mum, can nuns be actresses?" Because I just wanted to devote my life to God, but I loved the feeling of performing and sharing my smile and sharing my light with people and feeling them lift and going away feeling better. And so now I feel like I almost get to do that. I get to be a nun who's an actress because I'm living this spiritual life where I get to share my light and my honesty and my truth and my presence with others. So that's that. From then I went into, when I started to become a teenager, I went through a really difficult time where I had a very low self-esteem because of things that had happened deep in my childhood. And as I was growing up, I had things happen that lowered my self-esteem. And what started to happen was I dived into alcohol, and there was a big sort of a drug scene in my town with all the surfies and those sorts of things. And as I became, my family moved away from the church, and I didn't have something strong to hold on to in terms of an identity, I launched into this incredible sadness that was a form of depression. And so I sought answers through all of the stuff that many teenagers dive into. And it's not something I'm proud of. However, I'm grateful that I made it through that, because as I came out the other side of it, I understand that it's where still so many people are in their late 20s and in their 30s, and some people are even in their 40s still battling with depression, still battling with alcoholism, still battling with drug addiction, and some of them it's since they were 14 when they picked up their first cigarette or their first, joint or whatever it was. And so I'm deeply honoured that I got to go through that and nothing too dangerous ever happened to me, and I came out the other end. And it was a decision that I had to make on my own to get off it. And so I went through my psychology degree. I started a degree at 18 or 19, and I was living away from home in Hamilton at Waikato University doing social sciences, and psychology was a huge part of that. And on the way through, I remember this one time in particular, I was doing an neuro-linguistic programming process, and I looked down into this document and I was reading all about it, and I stopped. I remember stopped and had this awareness. It was like, oh my God, this is me. I'm really messed up. I'm like, this is all about me. I'm the one that's messy, and I'm the one that actually has a choice here. I have a choice to heal. I have a choice to make decisions that can change my life, and I can choose whether I'm going to stay sad and messed up and depressed and running away from my sadness, or whether I'm actually going to wake up and work with this. So very, very, very fortunately for me, I ended up doing a health program for about 6 months. My mother took me to a dietitian, and I did a program where I had to go off wheat, dairy, meat, sugars, alcohol, and even fruits away from the sugars. And I was taking supplements, natural supplements and oils and things at every meal. And people often say, what the hell were you living on? And it was like potatoes and carrots. But every single day while I was 20, it was the last 6 months of when I was 20, every single day that I wasn't using substances or sugars to alter, like beer or whatever it was, or fruit, to alter my consciousness, every single day I was becoming more and more aware and more sensitive and intuitive and psychic, and it was really scary. Like, it was really scary. And I would go to parties with the people around in that scene, and they didn't know, but I would take things like hibiscus tea. There was a hibiscus tea you could get which was bright red, and so I would sort of sneak into the kitchen, make a pot of hibiscus tea, and I'd put this tea into what I had these beautiful clay goblets that I'd found at a market that looked like I was drinking red wine. So I'd be there pretending I was drinking red wine so that nobody would force me to drink anything else. And what would happen is I would slowly watch everyone else deteriorate into stupidity, and I was sad. Oh God, I was sad, because I would watch these people who were so smart and so intelligent and so clever and so creative and witty, and oh my God, they were musicians and artists and really beautiful people, and they would just deteriorate into and thinking that they were having a great time. And of course I was sober, so I watched this tragedy actually, and by the end of the 6 months I realized that wasn't going to be the rest of my life. I didn't want to go back into that after I'd finished the 6 months. And I remember making a decision at the end of that time. It was actually around the time when I graduated, and I got my degree. That's my older brother there. And I graduated, and I remember sitting at the end of that university experience and looking forward. I felt like I was looking forward into my life. And I could clearly feel two paths. And one of them involved alcohol and drugs. And I'd been working part-time at this amazing art gallery, and I was in a rock band called the Levitating Daffodils, which I loved it. I loved that, wearing my Dr. Martens and my electric guitar, and we wrote our own songs, and we had a beautiful, Sarah was the female drummer and Megan was the other guitarist, and we had Chris was our male bass player. But I remember there was two paths, and one involved the whole art scene and alcohol and drugs, but the other path involved no drugs and no alcohol, and it actually involved God. And I had to make peace with what God was for me at that time. So during that 6-month process of clearing out all my energy, I was reading amazing books about chakras and energy and affirmations and meditation. And I actually had managed to come into some money so I could afford to go to a Reiki course at that time. And my Reiki teacher was John Veltheim, who was went on to become the president of the Australian Chiropractic Association. And he also went on to create Body Talk, which is a phenomenal modality to use as a healer. But at that time, so I learned Reiki, and that was like, oh my God, it was like nectar to me. It was incredible, and that helped me to turn many, many, many cycles. And they said in those days you couldn't go on and do the second Reiki until you'd done about 3 months of Reiki on yourself. So every morning I would set my alarm at 6 a.m. and I would do 5 minutes Reiki here, 5 minutes Reiki here, 5 minutes Reiki here, all over my body and all the way up my back, and then I'd get out of bed at about 7 o'clock and go about my day. So I was really diligent. Once I'd found this opening into this spiritual world, I never wanted to let it shut. And I could really feel it if I ever had alcohol or drugs again. I could really feel it that for up to a month I couldn't connect in the same way. And I would feel sad. I would get depressed as I was coming down off the high. And I realized that alcohol is actually a depressant. You go up, but then takes you down, down, down. So then I embarked on this journey where I had to move away from the group of people I was with, and I pulled back to some degree from that town, and I just started to mix with a newer group of people. And I did a course called Money and You with Robert Kiyosaki, that was before he'd written Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that was really phenomenal. I was the youngest person in the class. I was 22. Everyone else was like in their 30s and 40s. And they'd be looking at me like, well, what's she doing here? But I'd woken up. This is the early 90s where there was this massive awakening going on the planet. And so I went to this course, a spiritual course, and I was hungry, man. I was hungry for the next step. I was hungry for knowledge and awareness in my heart because I was aching. My soul was aching for the next step. And I knew that uni couldn't give it to me, and going on and doing a clinical psychology degree couldn't give me the next step, because I thought, even if I finished my psychology degree at 23, if I opened up a practice and I was sitting in a room and a 45-year-old woman came into my office and said to me, I want to leave my husband, no book is ever going to prepare a 23-year-old for dealing compassionately with somebody and going through a massive life crisis. So I started to meditate and pray for answers. And during that time, you're going to laugh, during that time I would create journals, and I'd journal a lot, I'd write a lot. I did chanting, I did some work with Guru Mai and Baba Muktananda, where they teach you a beautiful chant, which is Om Namah Shivaya, and beautiful tones. And I did a collage, and it was actually while I was doing this particular cover of a book that I had. I don't know if you can see that in the light. Yep. As I was doing this, you can see that that's me down the bottom, and I'm wearing black sand. I'm in my bikinis, and I'm in black sand from Raglan Beach, which is a really beautiful beach, and there's magical powers from the earth in that black iron sand. It felt phenomenal. And can you see that? Got it? Yeah, beautiful. And as I was doing that, I was praying for the next step, and I said, God, let me be of service. Show me where I've got to go. Show me who I'm meant to be with. I felt like there were people gathering to do work for the planet, and I needed to be with them. All of a sudden, one day I had this message, go to Auckland, which was a 1.5 hour city near us. So I grabbed all my hippie clothes, raced back to my mum's house in Mount Maunganui, dropped all my hippie clothes off there, and I was a massive hippie. And I actually passed a lot of them on to fresh new uni students who were wanting to be hippies. And then I grabbed as many of my mum's city clothes as I could borrow. And by that time she was this big and I was this big, so it was really funny. I was trying to be a city girl. But I raced up to Auckland, and I started to follow my intuition of where I was supposed to go and who I was supposed to meet. So I I would go around to this person and I'd sit and have a cup of tea. I made dates with about 8 different people from 8 different walks of life in Auckland. And some of them were in business, some of them were in television, some of them were like hippies, some of them were goths. But I was just contacting everyone that I knew in order to find the next step of my journey. And so it was like I was going, is this it? Is this the feeling I'm looking for? Is this the feeling? Anyway, I finally ended up in the office of a gentleman who was, he sat down opposite me at his desk and he said, it's funny that you're here today because I've just been looking for, putting it out to the universe. He said, I've just been putting it out to the universe to find some people to help me promote the spiritual course that's these spiritual people that are coming to New Zealand to do a spiritual course. And what started to happen to me at that time was, it was like the roof, it was as like there was this golden sort of light and like tingling bells happening in the roof. And it was this feeling like, oh, hang on a minute, this is way closer to any other feelings that I'd been having at any other of the places that I'd been visiting. And at the time, I'd actually written down that I'd wanted to become a promoter of New Zealand as a place of spiritual growth. It was one of my goals, so it actually was tying in with what I'd wanted. I can't find where I wrote it, but I'd written that down. So I ended up, he said, come, I'm having a business meeting, come along tonight at such and such a place. And I made it to the meeting, and there were candles going in the middle of the coffee table at this business meeting, and secretly inside myself I'm going, what's that? Like candles at a business meeting, right on. This is 25 years ago. And then he said, and let's do a quick meditation before we start this business meeting. And I was like, oh, fantastic. Meditation before a business meeting. I'm in the right place. And then he had these chimes. And as he went into the chimes, I honestly felt this thing go, boop, open at the top of my head. And all of a sudden it was like, all of this incredible energy started flowing through my body. And I felt like I was home. I thought, God, I found it, I made it, this is where I'm meant to be. And so he was teaching along with a German couple, Rainer Berchtold and Edelgard Rankoschk, and also John Machineau from the US. So those three were coming down to New Zealand, and they had other people were coming from Germany and America as well, and there were some people in Australia, so we were gathering people for these courses. Well, oh my God, I did these courses and they were like food for my soul. It was, I could only describe it as if I'd been crawling through the desert looking for information and energy, and being there was like feeding every cell of my body, was being lifted and enhanced. And it was at the Mana Retreat Centre in Coromandel in New Zealand. It was incredible. And I wanted to show you a photograph. This is me. This is me as it was actually at the beginning of the course. It's how young I was when I was embarking. And my hair's all funny then. I'd just been swimming in a natural waterfall in New Zealand at that time. And it was an incredible course, and I came out quite transformed. And ironically, I'd sold my electric guitar and my amplifier to go there. And I embarked on a journey where for about 4.5 years, I did physical training. Every morning I would wake with a group of other people. I would wake up early in my own home, and I would I do written affirmations of love and forgiveness with a pencil to get the energy out through my body and through a pencil that had no no paint on it, so that the energy would go through into the wood of the pencil, into the lead of the pencil, and onto the page. And I'd write 77 times. Then I would meet with these other people at 6 a.m. at a seminar centre in Auckland, and we would practice. We would do African shaking. We would stand and go. Standing up, doing this incredible, invigorating shaking for 15 minutes. Then we would do specific meridian clearing yoga exercises for about 45 minutes. Then we would do more African shaking for 10 minutes. And then we would do the 5 Tibetan rites. So you can Google all of those things, the 5 Tibetan rites, or you can look on my website. I'll put them on my website. And we did that, and then we would meditate, and it was very powerful. What it was doing was cleaning out the cells, like releasing all the old crap and energy from the cells and old cellular memory that wasn't serving us, and then bringing in more light. And the meditations at the end would go really, really high, and then we'd kind of have a shower, get dressed, and go off to work in the city. So it's like we were doing Buddhist style or monk or retreat style training, but almost 24/7 out in the real world. We were doing the Course of Miracles. We were doing a range of different things. And eventually, I was also doing a lot of workshops and things at that time. And I was doing healing work, and beautiful, beautiful healing work. So the gentleman that I was doing healing work with ended up becoming my husband. And he was 24 years my senior. So it was a big step in the eyes of society to commit to being in a relationship with him. However, it felt like it was what my heart needed to do. And so we did work in Auckland, and then we actually travelled to the UK, and we were there for a while, and I became pregnant, and in my belly, the womb of this child, when I was 5 months pregnant, I had this experience. The next part of my journey was all about my children. At 5 months pregnant with Niall, he came through. I was in the shower, and I'm just having the shower, and all of a sudden I felt this feeling come through, and the sound was this, Niall. It's like, you will call me Niall, and it was Nahal, and it was so weird because I thought I'm going to have to call my child Niall. So I went into the bedroom, and I said to Keith, I said, I just had the most amazing experience. And he said, you just got the name of the child, didn't you? And I said, yes. And he said, and it was Niall, wasn't it? And I said, yes, it was Niall. So we're both there. We were committing, and we're telling my folks and everybody we're going to call this child Niall. And they're like, oh my God, she's so weird. Anyway, we get to the UK, and of course there were a lot of kids that were called Niall. And so we thought, it must be Niall that we're going to call him. So we thought, we'll call him Niall. And then about a month or so to 6 weeks before he was born, his energy inside my body, like he'd been giving me message the whole way through. When I stood in the mirror, I could see his aura around my aura. Like people could feel my aura from 50 feet away with him inside me. And he would kick my butt spiritually if I was eating the wrong food, if I was doing the wrong thing. Like it was like, because he was like pumping my vibration, pumping my cellular vibration up high enough that he could come through, and my karma wouldn't affect his karma in my body. So anyway, he was saying, you've got to get me off this island, meaning the UK. He's like, I do not want to be born upon. I'm not going to be born upon. Get me to Ireland. So there we were, 9 days before my due date, or his due date. We're on this ferry boat crossing crossing the sea, going over from Wales to Ireland. And I've got my knees closed going, you are not going to be born on a boat. You are not going to be born on a boat. You are not going to be born on a boat. And I'm like this, and it was so funny. So anyway, we arrive, oh my God, we got up at sunrise coming into County Cork, the south of Ireland. And we're coming in there, and God, it was this incredible feeling. It reminded me of Matamata, which is where I was born, this mist coming over the hills, and my ancestry is Irish, and people over there would stop me as if I was a local, asking me directions, and I'd be like, oh, what? And they'd be like, they'd say, I'm sorry, I thought you were from here. So anyway, he was born in Tralee Hospital on the eve of the Rose of Tralee competition, and but I'd had a midwife, and of course, when the Irish person say the name Niall, they say it like Niall, don't they? So it actually felt like he'd actually known that he was going to be born in Ireland even before we did, because that name Niall was so profound. And there's a great story about Niall and the 9 hostages. He was this, he wasn't a king per se, but he was sick of all the warring clans, and it was destroying the whole area. And so what he did is he grabbed the heads, he kidnapped the heads of all of these 9 clans, and said, right, you guys are going to keep your shit together, or we're going to kill all the leaders. And it created this incredible peace that lasted for many, 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 many years. And while we were there with Niall, there was this incredible peace came over Ireland. There was, there was prayer going on, and they had, the Catholic and Protestant children together on television. They had a whole bunch of crazy stuff was going on, and I was weeping. I could feel this joy in my heart of this healing going on between the North and South and the religions there. So that's Niall's story. Then we ended up in Los Angeles for 5 years. Crikey, unbelievable. And I was so sensitive that being in LA, it was like being in the middle of the city and hearing 100,000 voices in my head. And as a result, I didn't quite know what to do about it, and I became pregnant with John, my middle child, who was gorgeous too. And we ended up being involved with a group who were creating Tesla products, and I found a Tesla watch that helped me tune out all of those other frequencies, and that meant that my husband was able to tune into and channeled through an incredible medical technology called EPRT technology, electropressure regeneration therapy technology. You can Google it. And so we lived there for 5 years, almost to the day, where I had 2 children there. My youngest son was Thor, and they all have great stories as well about their births and their names and the sacredness of their journey as they came through me. And quite angelic experiences. And but then when Niall got to the age of 6, we realized that we didn't want to raise our children in Los Angeles, that we needed to raise them somewhere where there was good air, where there was good values in the kids around them, where there was good water and food and light, a lot of light in the earth. And my husband was Australian, so we ended up moving to Tamborine Mountain. So if you've been to Tamborine Mountain, there's no traffic lights. I think they've just started putting in roundabouts. When I got there were barely even any roundabouts. And at the time, I think there were 5,000 people. I think there's 6,000 now. And it's this beautiful space just in the back of the Gold Coast on the southeast Queensland of Australia. And it's a really special sacred energy up there. And so we moved there, and my beautiful children, we went from this crazy city energy where the kids were going to be at schools with like concrete yards and chaos, and to this beautiful energy where when I was hanging out my clothes in the backyard, I could hear this hand school bell going while they were at their school. So it was just beautiful. It was a really great choice to get there. So we continued with the healing work and living on the land, and that was a big part of my life. And I ended up leaving my husband. There's a chunk of the story that I may tell at another time, but I ended up leaving my husband in end of 2010, early 2011, and began a huge spiritual journey on my own, where I had to go through an incredible, it was like a death and a rebirth, to be honest. And my self-esteem was in tatters. I went through what's called the Uranus opposition, which occurs between the ages of 37 and 43. And the Uranus opposition is an experience where it's as if this is your life and it's a picnic blanket. And you're in the middle of the picnic blanket. And around you there's your house and your home, there's your family, there's the family you've come from, there's your partner, your children, your job, and it's everything in your life that, your car, everything that you've defined yourself by. And what the Uranus opposition feels like is it feels like your higher self and God get together and they grab the end of that picnic blanket and they flip it and they go like this. And so all of a sudden you're like up in the middle and everything's flying around. And the more you try and reach for, what you identified with in the past as being real, the more you try and identify with those things, the further they're taken away from you, because it's as if you have to be erased from all of those things as being who you are because the real journey at that time is it's a spiritual journey. You actually get to look up and go, holy crap, I'm actually none of those things. I'm not my job, I'm not my car, I'm not my kids, I'm not my relationship, I am this incredible presence that has an incredible creative capacity to actually be responsible for everything that I'm creating in my life. If people are nice to me, I'm responsible for that. If people are crappy to me, I'm responsible for that. If my finances are falling apart, I'm responsible for that. The second that you can flip that switch during that time period to taking full responsibility for everything, then everything starts to transform and actually become really more congruent with your spiritual path. It's like your soul grabs you around the shoulders and starts to shake you and going, come on, you've got another 20, 30, 50 years on this planet. Get your act together. Let's do something powerful and present and something meaningful that matches in here. So I actually went through, remember back to the story where I spoke about if I was a psychology student and a 40-year-old woman walked into my office and said, I'm going through a crisis and I want to leave my husband. I got to go through that. And I got to lose everything. We'd been worth millions of dollars, had millions of dollars worth of assets, and I left with a car. And my sanity. But I became so wealthy and so rich. It sounds like such a cliche as I say it, but I was, because I found something incredibly eternal within me that just can't be broken. And I also, when I looked in the mirror as I was going through this time, I didn't like who I saw. I didn't honor who I'd become, and I couldn't recognize that little kid, the little one. I couldn't recognize her. And so I had to embark on a journey of repairing or soul restoring. And in that journey, I created an incredible philosophy and life experience and tools that I now share with and have shared with thousands of women. And I will continue to do so. And it warms my heart that there's value in all of the brokenness that I experienced. And I did go from being broken to feeling so blessed. And on the way through this, I tell the story of feeling like I'd lost everything. My ex-husband wanted, because he was, I don't want to make it about him. How do I say this? When I left, my ex-husband said I couldn't bring my children with me. And these are my beautiful boys. Yeah. And this was taken on the first Friday that I picked them up after I left. And I was allowed to visit with them, and they were allowed to visit with me, but they weren't allowed to stay overnight. My ex-husband had done quite a number on the way that they felt about me. And, I didn't take much furniture. I borrowed some furniture. But I knew I had to go, and I knew I had to go through what I went through. And what happened was, every time I felt like I wanted to fight or go to court or do something, I felt this energy. I felt like there were about 5 or 6 presences there saying, shh, 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 it's okay, it's all right, it's not yet, it's all going to be okay. And so a lot of my friends, when they found out, they were like, I was like, I can't understand it, but I've got to bless the situation. And even Cameron, I met Cameron during this time. Once I'd fallen in love with myself first, so deeply that I knew I could never be shaken or taken by another relationship again, that I would love myself no matter who I was with, whether I was with somebody or not. So when I got to the end of this time, and I'd moved in with Cameron, my friends had been saying you should fight, and everyone was saying fight, but this part of me was saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, just shh. The guides were saying this to me. Or this presence, this peace would come over me. And what finally happened was my ex-husband he passed away. And as a result of that, my children got to come back to live with me, and all of my favourite pieces of furniture from the home that I'd lived in with them got to come with them, and my cats. So there was a beautiful circle of trust that was completed by me trusting that I had to leave when I left, by me trusting that I had to go to the bottom of my barrel and rebuild myself from this core authenticity back up again. It came full circle, and I was able to redefine who I operated as in the world, and I was able to feel and receive the love of a good man, a beautiful man, Cameron, my husband. And I've got to have my children back under my roof. So it's been a big journey, and I'm sure there's things I'll remember when we switch off the camera. But I feel like you get the gist of it, and I feel like you get that if you are in any way drawn to either come for a session or come to one of our events or come and connect with me on one of the courses I teach, that you will understand that I'm not doing this work because I'm not doing it for any other reason that there's a gift in me that needs to be shared to the ears that it makes sense to. So if you've made it this far, God bless you. And I hope that some of what I've shared has helped you in your journey and will help you in your journey. And maybe I'm sure there's a few yes, ahas and things that you can relate to as part of your journey too. So I want to leave you with this. I still say the Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, which means our daily work. And forgive us our trespasses, which means where we may have sinned or hurt people. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass or sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. I still say that from that little Catholic upbringing. And when I do it, I feel incredible energy shifts all around me. Big portals open. It's like it comes in and clears the slate. And then I still say, Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sins now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So, to be continued. I know that this journey is not yet over, thank God, and I know we've all got a lot of work to do still to save the planet, to nurture each other, to be compassionate with each other's weaknesses and failings, and to lift each other up, and to show compassion in every act, thought, word and deed. I love you, and I'm grateful if you've found this valuable and if you've listened, and I look forward to perhaps meeting you in person someday soon. God bless, 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 God bless. And thank you, Ermon, for letting me share.